July 1878, Arizona Territory. A man who died 3 years ago was about to decide if he wanted to live again. This is why. The sun rose over Granite Creek Valley like it had every morning for 1,000 years, indifferent to the suffering of the men who worked the land below. Cole Brennan stood on the hill behind his ranch house, looking down at 2 graves marked with wooden crosses and names burned into the wood by his own hand. Sarah Brennan, beloved wife. Emma Brennan, precious daughter. Both taken in the fire of 1875. He came here every Sunday without fail, same time, same words. I'm sorry I wasn't there. The apology hung in the desert air, as hollow and useless as the 100 times he'd spoken it before. The cottonwood trees he'd planted on the day Emma was born whispered in the morning breeze, their leaves the only witnesses to his ritual of grief. 10 paces behind him, a boy stood watching. 7 years old, thin as a rail, with his father's dark hair and his dead mother's eyes. Benjamin Brennan had learned not to approach too close during these Sunday visits. His father spoke to the dead with more tenderness than he'd shown the living in 3 years. Ben whispered to himself words his father couldn't hear. He says that every week. To them, never to me. The boy's hands were calloused from work beyond his years. Fences to mend cattle, to check a ranch that kept running because stopping would mean admitting the truth. That Cole Brennan had buried more than his wife and daughter in 1875. He'd buried himself. Cole turned from the graves without looking at his son and walked down the hill toward the cabin. Ben followed at the prescribed distance, neither too close nor too far, a shadow learning to navigate the edges of a ghost's world. The cabin sat in a shallow valley, 160 acres of hard-won land, claimed under the Homestead Act in 1865, the year Cole returned from the war. The structure itself measured 20 by 24 feet solid timber, with a small loft where Ben slept. 1 room, 1 table, 2 chairs, 2 plates set for supper each night. 0 words spoken between them. That morning, Cole taught Ben to check the fence line on the eastern border. The work was methodical, almost meditative. Find the break, cut new wire, secure the post, move to the next section. Cole performed each task with precision, his hands remembering skills even when his heart had forgotten why they mattered. Ben watched everything, trying to learn not just the work, but the man. He stretched the wire when his father nodded. He hammered the staples when his father pointed. He hoped that maybe today, just once, he might hear the words, "Good job," or "Well done." Cole nodded at the finished repair and moved to the next post. No words, never words. That evening, they sat across from each other at the small table. Beans and cornbread, the same meal they'd eaten 3 times a week for as long as Ben could remember. The boy tried to start a conversation, testing the waters with small observations about the cattle or the weather or anything that might crack the silence. "I saw a hawk today. Big one. Do you think it's nesting nearby?" Cole looked up from his plate. His weathered face, all hard angles and sun-darkened skin, showed a moment of consideration. Then he nodded once and returned to eating. Ben tried again. "Miguel Martinez's mama helped Mrs. Johnson's baby last winter. Remember when the baby had that fever?" Another nod. This one slower, as if the name Martinez triggered some distant memory. "People say she knows healing herbs. Apache medicine." Cole's fork paused halfway to his mouth. His eyes gray as winter sky met his son's for just a second. Then he set the fork down, stood from the table, and walked outside to the porch. Ben sat alone in the silence, staring at his father's unfinished plate. Later that night, the boy lay in the loft, listening to the sounds of the desert. Coyotes called in the distance. The wind rattled the shutters. And downstairs his father sat in the darkness, awake but not living, breathing but not alive. Ben whispered into the darkness, "I wish you could see me, just once." The morning broke hard and bright, the kind of Arizona summer day that baked the land before the sun cleared the horizon. Cole was already up, coffee boiling on the stove, when Ben climbed down from the loft. They moved through the morning routine in their usual silence. Feed the horses, check the water trough. Saddle up for the ride to Skull Valley, where the cattle sometimes wandered. Cole mounted his gray gelding, a reliable animal named Ash, 15 hands high and steady as stone. Ben climbed onto his smaller paint mare, a gift from his father on his 6th birthday, one of the last times he remembered Cole smiling. They rode east as the sun climbed higher heat, already shimmering off the desert floor. Skull Valley lay 12 miles out a natural basin with good grazing and a spring that ran year-round. It was peaceful country, the kind of landscape that could make a man forget there was ugliness in the world. Then Ben saw it first. Smoke. Not the thin gray wisp of a campfire or the white puff of a burning brush. This was thick and black, rising in a column against the blue sky like a funeral pyre. The boy's voice cracked when he spoke. "Dad?" Cole had already seen it. His hand moved instinctively to the rifle in his saddle scabbard, checking it was there, loaded ready. His face showed nothing, but Ben knew that look, the same expression his father wore when he stood at the graves, seeing something that wasn't there anymore, remembering. Cole turned Ash's head away from the smoke. Ben's heart sank. Of course they would right away. His father had spent 3 years running from everything that might require him to care, to feel, to risk. Why would today be different? But then the boy thought about Miguel Martinez and his little sister Sophia. He thought about their mother, the woman with kind eyes who'd saved Mrs. Johnson's baby. He thought about Emma, his own sister, burning while his father was away on a cattle drive, unable to save her. The words came out before Ben could stop them. "Dad, what if there's a kid there, like Emma?" Cole froze. His entire body went rigid in the saddle, as if the name had struck him physically. For a long moment he didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't exist, as anything but a statue of a man caught between the living and the dead. Then he spoke, and his voice was rough as sandpaper. "Get on behind me, now!" Ben scrambled off his mare and climbed up behind his father on Ash. Cole spurred the gelding forward toward the smoke, toward whatever horror waited in Skull Valley. The boy wrapped his arms around his father's waist and held on tight, feeling the tension in the man's body like a coiled spring about to break. They rode hard for 20 minutes, covering ground at a pace that made Ben's teeth rattle. As they crested the final ridge, the full scope of the devastation came into view. 5 Wickiup's traditional Apache dwellings made of brush and hide had been reduced to smoking skeletons of blackened wood. Bodies lay scattered across the clearing, 9 in total, visible even from a distance. The earth itself seemed to have been scorched, as if hell had reached up through the desert floor and claimed everything it touched. Cole dismounted slowly, his movements careful and controlled. He tied Ash to a mesquite tree and pulled the rifle from its scabbard. Ben slid down after him, his legs shaking, his stomach churning at the smell that rode the wind toward them. Burned wood, burned flesh, death. "Stay close," Cole said. The first complete sentence he'd spoken to his son in days. They walked into the clearing together, and Ben forced himself to look at what men had done to other men, old and young, men and women. Executed, not fought. This hadn't been a battle. This had been murder. In the center of the destruction, standing among the ashes and bodies like a spirit of vengeance, was a woman. She held 2 children close, one on each side, her arms wrapped around them in a grip that said she'd die before letting go. Her face was streaked with soot and dirt, but her eyes burned with an intensity that cut through the smoke and devastation. She was maybe 28, dressed in a mix of Apache and settler clothing, dark hair hanging loose around her shoulders. In her right hand, she held a hunting knife. When she saw Cole and Ben, she turned to face them fully, her body shifting to place herself between the strangers and the children. The knife came up steady and sure. "Stay back," her voice was clear, strong, with no trace of fear, "or I add you to the graves." Cole stopped 10 feet away, rifle held low and unthreatening. He took in the scene with practiced eyes. The woman, the children, the bodies, the burned homes. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, as if he were seeing not just what was in front of him, but what had been in front of him 3 years ago. "I'm not here to hurt you, ma'am." She studied him with those fierce eyes, taking in his worn work clothes, his weathered face, the gray streaking his dark hair. Just a rancher. Nobody special, nobody threatening, but she'd learned the hard way that appearances meant nothing. The knife stayed up. Ben stepped forward from behind his father, his young voice cutting through the tension. "Miss Lena, you helped Mrs. Johnson's baby last winter when he had the fever. You gave her the medicine that saved him." The woman's eyes shifted to the boy, and something in her expression softened just slightly. Recognition. She lowered the knife a fraction of an inch. "You're the Brennan boy, the one whose mother died." Ben nodded. "Yes, ma'am. This is my father, Cole Brennan. We saw the smoke." Lena looked back at Cole, reassessing. The knife lowered further, but she didn't put it away. "These people need burying," Cole said quietly. "I've got a shovel on my saddle. We'll do it proper if you'll allow it." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she nodded once, sharp and quick. Cole walked back to Ash and retrieved the shovel. When he returned, he extended it handle first toward Lena. She took it with one hand, the knife still gripped in the other, and together they began the grim work of digging graves. Ben helped where he could, his small hands moving dirt that would cover people he'd never known. The two children huddled together, watching with hollow eyes. The boy looked about 9 with his mother's dark features and a strength in his bearing that spoke of growing up too fast. The little girl was maybe 4, the same age Emma had been. She clutched a small doll made of corn husks and cried silently, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on her face. They dug 9 graves, each one 4 feet deep, to keep the animals away. The work took hours, under the merciless sun. Cole's shirt was soaked through with sweat. Lena worked beside him without stopping, without complaining, her movements mechanical and efficient. She'd done hard labor before. This wasn't her first grave. The last grave was different. Lena stood over it longer than the others, her hand resting on a beautifully crafted hunting bow, before she placed it inside. She knelt and spoke a single sentence in Apache words Cole didn't understand, but recognized as a language of grief that crossed all cultures. When they finished, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and orange that seemed obscene given the day's horror. Cole built a small fire and offered what food he had: hardtack, jerky, coffee that had been in his saddlebag too long. Lena fed the children first, making sure they ate, even though they didn't want to. Then she ate slowly, methodically, like someone who'd forgotten that food could be anything but fuel. Cole boiled coffee in a battered tin pot and poured 3 cups. One for himself, one for Lena, one for the older boy who looked like he needed to feel like a man tonight. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling, the desert settling into its evening sounds. Finally, Cole spoke. "You got family nearby tribe that would take you in?" Lena stared into the fire. "My mother's people are 2 days north, Mescalero camp near the White Mountains." "They'll help." She paused, and when she spoke her voice was flat, empty of emotion, just facts. "My mother was Mescalero. My father was Spanish. A traitor. When I married Daniel, a white settler, some in the tribe called it a second betrayal. And his people, his father, disowned him, said he'd polluted the bloodline." Cole understood that tone. He'd used it himself when talking about Sarah and Emma. When the pain was too big for feelings, you retreated into facts. "I can take you north," he offered. 2 days is nothing. We'll manage. We'll manage alone." He blinked, surprised. In 3 years, no one had refused his help, mostly because he'd never offered any. "Ma'am, your boy is sick. I can hear him coughing. And you've got no horse, no supplies. It's dangerous country. We've survived worse. Why refuse help?" She looked at him, then really looked at him, and he saw the steel in her spine that had kept her standing when everything else had fallen. "Because men don't help for free. They expect something back, and I've got nothing left to give." The words hit Cole like a fist to the chest. She was right. In his experience, most men did expect payment of one kind or another. He couldn't blame her for assuming he was the same. He had no answer for that, no argument that wouldn't sound hollow. The night passed slowly. Cole kept the fire going, sitting on one side, while Lena and the children huddled on the other. The boy, whose name Cole still didn't know, coughed throughout the night. A wet, rattling sound that Cole recognized from winters long ago. Emma had coughed like that the winter before she died. When morning came, Cole saddled Ash and prepared to leave. He'd done what he could. The rest wasn't his responsibility. He had his own ghosts to tend his own grave, to dig a little deeper each day. But as he mounted, he heard the boy cough again, saw Lena checking his forehead for fever, watched the little girl cry quietly into her mother's skirt. And something broke inside him, or maybe something that had been broken started to heal. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. Cole climbed down from his horse and walked back to where Lena stood. "The boy needs shelter," he said. "Warm food, rest, medicine. He won't make it 2 days on foot in this heat. He's stronger than you think. Maybe. But why risk it?" He paused, gathering words that had been buried for 3 years. "My place is 12 miles west. Stay there until he's better. Then I'll take you north myself. No strings, no expectations. Just shelter until the boy can travel." Lena looked at her son, whose face was flushed with fever, then back at Cole. The knife was still in her belt within easy reach. Why? The question hung between them, simple and impossible. Cole looked at Ben standing by the horses, watching this exchange with desperate hope in his young eyes. He looked at the 9 fresh graves. He looked at Lena and saw Sarah standing alone in a burning house with no one coming to help. Because 3 years ago, my house burned, my wife and daughter died, and no one came to help because no one knew. I won't be that person. I won't ride away. Something shifted in Lena's eyes. Not trust, not yet. but maybe the beginning of it. 1 week, she said. Then we go. And I work for my keep. I don't take charity. Cole nodded. Fair enough. The journey to his ranch took 2 hours. Cole gave Lena his horse, her and the little girl riding, while he walked alongside, carrying the boy in his arms. The child was burning up now, drifting in and out of consciousness, mumbling words in a mix of English, Spanish, and Apache. Somewhere along the trail, Cole found himself humming an old song, a lullaby from before the war or when the world was different. All the pretty little horses. He'd sung it to Emma every night until the night she died. Lena's voice came from above him, quiet. That's a Southern song. You fought for the North. War is war, Cole replied. Sadness sounds the same on both sides. You lost someone in the war, too. Everyone did. When they reached the ranch, the sun was setting again. The cabin stood alone on the prairie, small and weathered and lonely. Cole carried the boy inside and laid him on the only bed, his bed, the one he hadn't slept in since Sarah died, because sleeping in the barn hurt less than sleeping in the place where she should have been. Lena stood in the doorway, taking in the spare interior. 1 room, 1 table, 2 chairs, a gun rack, a cold stove. No pictures on the walls, no personal items anywhere, just the bare necessities for survival. You really do live like you're already dead, she said quietly. You 3 take the cabin, Cole told her. I'll sleep in the barn. We don't need your bed. Not up for debate, ma'am. He walked to the door and paused, looking back. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, holding the boy's hand. The little girl climbed up beside them, curling into her mother's side. For the first time in 3 years, Cole's house had life in it. That night, lying in the barn on a pile of hay, staring up at the rafters, Cole couldn't sleep. His mind kept returning to the cabin, to the 3 people inside who'd lost everything just like he had. 3 people who needed him to be something more than a ghost. From the doorway, Ben appeared, small and uncertain. Dad, can I stay out here with you tonight? Cole sat up, surprised. Cabin's warmer. I know, but I thought maybe you were lonely. The word struck something deep in Cole's chest. When was the last time anyone had worried about his loneliness? When was the last time he'd let anyone close enough to see it? Come on, then! Ben settled into the hay beside his father, and for a while they lay in silence. Then the boy spoke, his voice small in the darkness. Are you glad we went to the smoke? Cole thought about it, thought about Lena's eyes, the children's faces, the feel of the sick boy in his arms, trusting him to carry him to safety. Yeah, son, I think I am. Me too. They fell asleep side by side, father and son, neither one alone for the first time in 3 years. And in the cabin, Lena held her children close and allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd found shelter with a man whose word meant something. The dead deserved rest. The living deserved a chance. Tomorrow, Cole Brennan would have to decide which one he wanted to be. The sun rose on a new day, and Cole Brennan woke with a purpose he hadn't felt in 3 years. Miguel's fever had worsened during the night. The boy needed medicine, real medicine, not just hope and prayers. Cole found Lena already awake in the cabin, boiling water on the stove he'd thought was broken. She'd somehow coaxed it back to life, and the smell of coffee filled the small space. Real coffee, not the chicory substitute most folks settled for. Boy's fever is worse, she said without turning around. No greeting, no small talk, just the facts that mattered. I'll ride to Prescott, get quinine bark. Doc Carter keeps some at his office. Town. The word carried weight. They'll ask questions. Let them ask. She turned then, and in the morning light, he saw the exhaustion in her face. She'd been up all night with Miguel, cooling his forehead, monitoring his breathing, keeping him alive through sheer force of will. I'll be back before noon, Cole said. Ben will stay here with you. The boy should go with you, safer. Safer here, with you. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding. She was capable of protecting his son. He trusted her with that. The thought should have terrified him, trusting anyone with Ben after what happened to Emma. But somehow it didn't. Cole saddled Ash and rode hard for Prescott, pushing the gelding faster than he should have. The town sat 12 miles south, a growing settlement that served the ranchers and miners scattered across the territory. By the time he arrived, the main street was already busy with morning business. He tied Ash outside Henderson's Mercantile and went inside the bell, over the door jangling his arrival. Martha Henderson stood behind the counter, a woman of 52 with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Cole Brennan. She drew out his name like she was tasting it. Haven't seen you in 2 weeks. Heard you got company. Word traveled fast in small towns. It always did. Just helping folks in need, Mrs. Henderson. An Indian woman and 2 half-breed children, they say. That true? His jaw tightened. Apache and Spanish both. And yes. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow managed to carry to every corner of the store. People are talking Cole, saying you finally found yourself a woman. About time, too, if you ask me. I need quinine bark, he interrupted. Willow bark tea, if you have it, honey, and flour. Mrs. Henderson's mouth pinched, but she gathered the items. As she wrapped them, she couldn't resist one more comment. Just be careful, Cole. Some folks around here don't take kindly to mixing. Some folks should mind their own business. He paid and left, heading next to Doc Carter's office. The doctor was out on a call, but his assistant sold Cole the quinine bark and gave instructions on dosage. 20 minutes in town, and Cole was already ready to leave. He preferred the honest silence of the desert to the poisonous whispers of civilization. But as he loaded the supplies onto Ash, Sheriff Marcus Webb emerged from the saloon across the street. The lawman's face lit up when he saw Cole, a genuine smile that spoke of old friendship. Cole Brennan, thought you'd become a complete hermit. Just practicing. Marcus laughed, the sound warm and familiar. They'd served together in the war, fought side by side through battles whose names still haunted dreams. If Cole had a friend in this world, it was Marcus Webb. Come have coffee, Marcus said. Real coffee, not trail mud. Cole wanted to refuse, wanted to get back to the ranch and make sure Miguel was still breathing. But Marcus's expression had shifted from friendly to serious, and Cole recognized that look. The sheriff had something to say. They sat at a corner table in the saloon, empty at this hour, except for the bartender cleaning glasses. Marcus ordered 2 coffees and waited until they were alone before speaking. Want to tell me about the Apache woman? Cole told him everything. The smoke, the massacre, Lena and her children. The overnight stay that had turned into something more. Marcus listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing more serious with each detail. 9 dead, Marcus said finally. You sure it was settlers did it? Bullet wounds, not arrows. And she said they were white men. 10 riders. Marcus rubbed his face, a gesture Cole recognized as the sheriff working through a problem. Army deserters, maybe? Or raiders? You know people are already talking. Let them talk. It's not that simple, Cole. You bring an Apache woman to your ranch, folks are going to assume things. She's not just Apache. Her father was Spanish. Her husband was a settler. She's got as much right to be here as anyone. You know that. I know that. But try explaining it to Buck Morrison and his friends. As if summoned by his name, Buck Morrison himself walked into the saloon. His nose was still bandaged from a fight 3 nights ago, though that one hadn't involved Cole. When Buck saw them sitting together, his eyes narrowed with the particular stupidity that comes from mixing whiskey and prejudice. Well, well, Buck said loud enough for the whole room to hear. The hermit got himself a squaw. Cole set down his coffee cup very carefully. Marcus put a hand on his arm. Don't, Marcus said quietly. But Buck was drunk or stupid or both, and he kept talking as he walked closer. Tell me, Cross, does she warm your bed or you keeping her for the housework? I hear they're good at that. Cole's chair hit the floor as he stood. His fist connected with Buck's jaw before the man could finish his sentence. The punch was clean efficient, carrying 3 years of rage behind it. Buck went down like a dropped sack of grain. But this time, Cole didn't stop at one punch. He was on Buck in a heartbeat, fists flying every ounce of grief and anger and self-hatred pouring out of him. Buck tried to fight back, but Cole fought with the cold precision of a man who'd survived a war. He fought like a man who'd forgotten how to feel anything except fury. Marcus pulled him off, dragged him bodily toward the door, shoving him outside into the bright morning sunlight. Cole's knuckles were split and bleeding. Buck lay on the saloon floor, blood streaming from his broken nose and split lip. God damn it, Cole, Marcus said, his voice tight with frustration. What the hell's gotten into you? He crossed a line. And you just painted a target on your back. People think she's more than a guest now. Cole jerked his arm free from Marcus's grip. I don't care what people think. You should. Because if word gets back to whoever hired those riders, if they think you're harboring Apache, they'll come. And I won't be able to stop them. The words hit Cole like cold water. He forced himself to breathe, to think, to see past the red haze of anger. Who would hire riders to massacre a camp? Marcus's expression darkened. That's what I've been trying to tell you, before you decided to redecorate Buck's face. He pulled Cole away from the saloon, out of earshot. The woman's husband, what was his name? Daniel Martinez. And his father, she said he was disowned, some rich rancher from Texas. Marcus closed his eyes. Christ. Cole, do you know who Daniel Martinez's father was? No. Charles Garrett owns the Triple G Ranch, 50,000 acres of prime Texas grazing land, 3,000 head of cattle, more money than God. The name meant nothing to Cole, but the way Marcus said it carried weight. If Garrett wanted those children dead, they'd be dead, Marcus continued, which means He wants them alive. For a reason. Cole's mind raced, putting pieces together. The land grant. What land grant? Lena mentioned something about Daniel having land. Spanish grant from before American annexation. Marcus whistled low. If that's true, if Garrett's trying to claim it through his grandchildren, this isn't just about family. This is about money. Serious money. Then we need to protect them. Cole, you're talking about going up against one of the richest men in the Southwest. He's got lawyers. He's got guns. He's got judges in his pocket. I don't care. Marcus studied his friend's face, seeing something there he hadn't seen in 3 years. Life, purpose, determination. You're actually doing this. After 3 years of being a ghost, you're going to war for a woman you just met. For a woman and 2 children who deserve better than what this world's given them. Yeah, I'm doing this. The sheriff was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Then you're going to need help. And supplies. Come on. They went back to Henderson's Mercantile. Martha took one look at Cole's bloody knuckles and raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. When Marcus explained they needed extra provisions, her expression softened. For the children, for all of them, Cole said. Martha began gathering items without being asked. Flour, sugar, salt, dried beans, salted pork, coffee. She wrapped everything carefully and set it on the counter. How much do I owe you? Cole asked. $20 for the lot. It was half what she should have charged, and they both knew it. Cole paid without comment, but as he gathered the packages, Martha spoke again. Cole Brennan, I've known you since you came back from the war. Watched you bury yourself after Sarah and Emma died. This is the first time in 3 years you've looked like you remember you're alive. She glanced at Marcus, then back to Cole. Whatever you're doing, whoever you're protecting, don't let the bastards win. Good people are too rare to lose. Cole rode back to the ranch with Martha's words echoing in his head. The supplies weighed heavy in his saddlebags, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. The desert stretched out before him, endless and unchanging, but for the first time he could see past the emptiness to what might be built there. When he crested the final rise and the ranch came into view, he saw Lena outside the cabin. She was working on the fence line, the section that had been cut during the night. Her movements were quick and sure, stretching wire and tying it off with a perfect hitch. Ben and Sophia sat nearby, the little girl, teaching his son some kind of hand game. Their laughter carried on the wind, a sound Cole hadn't heard from Ben in so long he'd forgotten what it meant. He dismounted and walked over to where Lena worked. She didn't startle, though he'd approached quietly. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked, nodding at her handiwork. "My father, Jacques Moreau. He was a fur trader from Quebec, traveled the Southwest for 20 years. Trader must have needed to know a lot of skills." She finished the knot and moved to the next section. "He said a woman should know how to survive without a man. Taught me everything. How to build, hunt, trade, heal." She tested the wire's tension, satisfied with her work. "He also taught me that people fear what they don't understand, and they hate what they fear." "What happened to him?" "White traders killed him when I was 15. Said a Frenchman with an Indian wife was bad for business." Her voice remained level factual, as if discussing the weather rather than murder. Cole understood. Some pains were too big to feel, so you made them into facts instead. "My mother died a year later," Grief the healer said. "I think she just didn't want to live in a world without him." They worked in silence for a while, Cole holding the wire while Lena secured it. The rhythm of shared labor felt natural, easy, like they'd done this 100 times before. "Your husband," Cole said eventually. "Daniel, how'd you meet?" A small smile touched her lips, sad but genuine. "He came to trade with my mother's people. Most settlers wanted to cheat us, but Daniel was fair, honest. We talked sometimes, and then we talked more. And then one day he asked if I'd marry him. Both your families disowned you. His father said he'd polluted the bloodline. My tribe said I'd betrayed them twice. First for my father's blood, then for my husband's." She tied off another section of fence. "But we married anyway. Love doesn't ask permission from the world." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Cole thought about Sarah, about the life they'd built before the fire, about the choice to love despite the risks, despite the certainty that loss would come eventually. "Daniel had land," Lena continued, her voice dropping lower. "A Spanish land grant. His great-grandfather received it in 1821. 50,000 acres along the Arizona-New Mexico border. Daniel spent years trying to get it legally recognized, validated by American courts." Cole stopped working. "That's worth a fortune." Daniel thought so, but he died before he could secure it. Now his father wants it. Through the children. Through the children. That evening, after Miguel's fever had finally broken, thanks to the quinine after the children were fed and settling into sleep, Miguel pulled Cole aside. The boy's face was serious beyond his 9 years. "Mr. Cole, can I show you something in secret?" "Sure, son." Miguel reached under his shirt and pulled out a silver medallion on a leather cord. He opened his hand, revealing the disc in the lamplight. Cole took it carefully. Old Spanish silver, heavy and real. He held it up to examine the engravings. Coordinates etched into one side. On the back, an inscription. "Garrett Land Grant, 1821, 50,000 acres. "Papa gave it to me before he died," Miguel whispered. "Said to keep it secret, to tell no one. Not yet." Cole looked at the boy, seeing the weight of that secret pressing down on small shoulders. "This is proof," Cole said slowly. "Legal proof of ownership in your name." "I know," Papa explained. "He said when I was older, when I was ready, I could use it to claim what's mine." "Your mother doesn't know," Miguel shook his head. "Papa said tell her when it's safe, when the danger is past." Cole knelt down to the boy's level. "Miguel, this secret is dangerous. Men kill for this kind of money." "I know. They killed my papa." The simple truth of it, spoken in a child's voice, cut deeper than any adult's rage. "Will you help me?" Miguel asked. "Keep it secret until we know what to do. Papa said I should trust my instincts about people. My instincts say I can trust you." Cole thought about that trust, about what it meant to be given something so precious by a child who'd already lost everything once. "Yes," he said, "I'll help you. But eventually we tell your mother. Family doesn't keep secrets from family. You understand?" "Yes, sir." Miguel hugged him, then sudden and fierce, and Cole's arms came up automatically to hold him. It had been so long since he'd held a child who wasn't running from fever dreams, so long since anyone had trusted him with anything that mattered. When Miguel went back inside, Cole stood alone in the barn, turning the medallion over in his hands. 50,000 acres. That kind of land would explain everything. Would explain why Lena's husband had been killed. Would explain why riders might be watching the ranch even now. He heard footsteps and looked up to find Lena in the doorway. "Miguel showed you," she said. Not a question. "You knew." "I suspected. Daniel was protecting something those last weeks. Something that made him scared and determined at the same time." She walked closer, her face half in shadow. "Now, I need to ask you something, Cole Brennan, and I need the truth." "Okay. You've been alone for 3 years, turned away every woman in town, but you let me stay. You fight for us. You teach my children." She paused, gathering courage. "You want a wife, Cole Brennan, or just shelter?" The question hung in the air between them, enormous and terrifying and real. Cole stared out at the darkening prairie at the fence line they'd repaired together at the cabin where 3 people slept who'd somehow become his responsibility. "I don't know if I remember how to want anything anymore," he said finally. "After Sarah, I built walls so thick I forgot there was anything outside them." "Then maybe it's time you remembered." "What if I fail you? What if I can't protect you like I couldn't protect them?" Lena stepped closer, close enough that he could see the fire in her eyes. "Then we fail together. But I'd rather fail trying to live than succeed at being dead." He looked at her, then really looked at her and saw not Sarah's ghost, but a living woman. Strong, brave, alive in a way he'd forgotten was possible. "I want both," he said quietly. "A wife, a family, a life. But only if it's you, only if it's them." "You sure? Because if you say yes, I fight beside you, not behind you. I wouldn't have it any other way." They stood together in the barn doorway as full dark fell, not touching, but close enough to feel the possibility humming between them. Tomorrow would bring new dangers. Tonight, they had this moment of hope. Inside the cabin, Ben and Sophia slept side by side like the siblings they were becoming. Miguel rested easy for the first time in days, his fever broken, his secret shared. And on the hill behind the ranch, 2 graves stood silent under the stars. Cole didn't visit them that night. For the first time in 3 years, he had somewhere else to be, somewhere with the living. 3 days passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal. Miguel's strength returned hour by hour, the color coming back to his cheeks as the quinine did its work. Sophia followed Ben everywhere, their laughter filling the cabin with a sound Cole had thought he'd never hear again. Lena worked alongside Cole from dawn to dusk, mending what was broken, building what was needed, transforming the lonely ranch into something that resembled a home. But normalcy was a lie, and they all knew it. The riders came on the 4th day. Cole was shoeing a horse in the yard when he heard them. 3 horses approaching from the east, moving at an unhurried pace that spoke of confidence rather than urgency. These weren't men running from something. They were men who believed they owned the right to be here. He straightened slowly, wiping his hands on his pants. The riders crested the small rise that led to the ranch, and Cole took in every detail with the practiced eye of a man who'd survived a war by reading danger before it arrived. The leader dismounted first, 50 years old maybe, with gray hair slicked back and cold eyes that assessed everything they touched. He wore a suit, expensive cloth that had no business in the Arizona desert. City clothes. Lawyer clothes, the kind of man who used paper and words as weapons instead of guns. The two men with him stayed mounted, hands resting near their pistols. Hired guns, both of them. The kind who killed for money and asked no questions. Lena stepped out of the cabin, Miguel and Sophia behind her. Ben moved to stand beside his father, young, but trying to look older, trying to be ready for whatever came next. The suited man smiled, but it was the smile of a shark who'd spotted blood in the water. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Victor Sterling, attorney from Austin. I'm here on behalf of Charles Garrett of the Triple G Ranch in Texas." Cole said nothing, just stood there with his hands loose at his sides, close to the rifle leaning against the fence post. Sterling continued, his voice carrying the practiced smoothness of a man who argued for a living. "I believe you're currently providing shelter to Mrs. Elena Martinez and her two children, Miguel and Sophia. That's very charitable of you, but I'm afraid I have business with the lady." "State your business," Cole said, his voice flat and hard. Sterling reached into his coat, slowly, making a show of being unthreatening as he pulled out folded papers. "I have here a custody warrant signed by Judge Harold Morrison in Santa Fe. It pertains to the minor children currently in Mrs. Martinez's care." Lena's hand moved to Miguel's shoulder, pulling him closer. Sophia pressed against her mother's side. "On what grounds?" Lena's voice was steady, but Cole could hear the fear underneath. Sterling unfolded the papers with theatrical precision. "On the grounds that you are deemed an unfit mother, Mrs. Martinez. No legal home, no documented income, no legal standing as a widow." "That's horseshit," Cole said. "Is it—" "The law doesn't recognize Apache marriage ceremonies, Mr. Brennan, without proper legal documentation of her marriage to Daniel Martinez. Mrs. Martinez has no parental rights whatsoever." He smiled again, enjoying his own performance. "Furthermore, we have an affidavit stating that Daniel Martinez was mentally unfit when he allegedly married this woman, which makes any such marriage null and void under territorial law." "That's a lie," Lena said, stepping forward. Her eyes blazed with controlled fury. "My husband Daniel was your client's son, and he was sharper, braver, and more honorable than any man Charles Garrett ever employed." Sterling's smile widened. "Strong words from a woman with no legal standing. But that's the beauty of the law, Mrs. Martinez. Feelings don't matter, only documentation. And you have none." Miguel moved to stand in front of his mother, his small body rigid with the kind of courage that came from watching your father die. "You can't take us. Mr. Cole won't let you." The lawyer's eyes shifted to Cole, assessing, calculating. "Ah, yes, the heroic rancher. Tell me, Mr. Brennan, are you prepared to interfere with a legal warrant? Because that's a federal offense, punishable by imprisonment or worse." Cole took a step forward, his hand moving closer to the rifle. "I'm prepared to defend children on my property. However, that needs to happen." One of the hired guns shifted in his saddle hand, moving toward his pistol. Cole marked him. If shooting started, that one would be first. Sterling held up a hand, stopping his man. "No need for violence. Not yet. We're civilized people here." He refolded the papers and tucked them back into his coat. "You have 48 hours, Mr. Brennan. 2 days to surrender the children voluntarily to their lawful grandfather's custody. If you refuse, we will return with a federal marshal and sufficient force to execute this warrant, and anyone who interferes will be arrested or buried, your choice." "Get off my land," Cole said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more threat than a shout. Sterling mounted his horse with careful dignity. 48 hours, Mr. Brennan. Use them wisely. Think about whether 2 half-breed children are worth your life, your son's future, your ranch." He turned his horse, his men following, but at the edge of the property, he called back one more time. "Oh, and Mr. Brennan, threatening a legal officer of the court, I'll be adding that to my report. Have a pleasant evening." They rode away, leaving dust and dread in their wake. The silence that followed felt like the moment before a storm breaks. Cole could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of every breath. Lena stood frozen, her hands gripping her children so tight her knuckles had gone white. Ben spoke first, his voice small and scared. "Dad, what do we do?" Before Cole could answer, another rider appeared on the horizon. This one was alone, moving fast. Cole's hand found the rifle this time, bringing it up to a ready position. But as the rider got closer, he recognized the horse, Marcus Webb's bay gelding. The sheriff was riding hard, pushing his mount beyond what was safe. Marcus reined in sharply, his horse breathing hard, foam flecking its neck. "Did they come here?" he asked without preamble. Left 5 minutes ago, Cole said. You just missed them. Marcus dismounted, his face grim. I tried to warn you. Got word this morning that Sterling was in town filing papers at the federal office. I rode out as fast as I could. 48 hours, Lena said, her voice hollow. They gave us 48 hours. Marcus looked at her, at the children, at Cole. Then we have 48 hours to figure this out. They moved inside the cabin, the children sent to the loft so the adults could talk. Cole poured whiskey into 4 tin cups, the cheap rot gut that burned going down, but steadied nerves. They needed steady nerves for this conversation. Sterling's warrant is legal, Marcus said, taking a long drink. Judge Morrison did sign it. I checked. Morrison's corrupt, Cole said. Probably, but he's still a judge. His signature carries weight. So what do we do? Lena asked. Run. Try to reach my mother's people. Marcus shook his head. Garrett has resources you can't outrun. Money, connections. He'll hire trackers. He'll pay off marshals in every territory between here and Canada if he has to. Then we fight, Cole said. Here, now. Against what? The law. Against corruption. Against men who think money can buy children. Marcus set down his cup, his hands shaking slightly. Cole noticed, filed it away. Something was wrong with his friend beyond the obvious crisis. Cole, Marcus said quietly, I need to tell you something, before this goes any further, before you trust me with anything else. The sheriff's face had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool interior of the cabin. Last year, when Mary was dying, the medicine she needed cost $800. I didn't have it. The bank wouldn't loan it. And then this man showed up at my office. Said his name was Sterling. Said he worked for a cattle baron in Texas. Said he'd pay me $1,000 for a signature on a document. Cole's stomach went cold. Marcus, what did you sign? An affidavit stating that Daniel Martinez and Elena Sandoval were never legally married. That their Apache ceremony had no standing under American law. The words fell like stones into still water, rippling out in waves of betrayal. Lena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the wood floor. You took money to lie about my marriage? My wife was dying. Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. I told myself it was just paperwork, that it wouldn't matter, that no one would ever use it. But they are using it, Cole said, his voice tight with controlled rage. They're using your signature to take her children. I know. Marcus looked up and there were tears in his eyes. I know, and Mary died anyway. 6 weeks later, with the best medicine money could buy, she died anyway. So I sold my honor for nothing. Cole wanted to hit him, wanted to throw him out of the cabin, out of his life, away from these people who'd started to trust them. But something in Marcus's face stopped him. Not the tears, not the guilt, the determination underneath it. Why are you telling us this? Cole asked. Because I can undo it. Not the signature that's permanent, but I can testify that I was bribed, that Sterling came to me with money and a story, and I took it because I was desperate and stupid and wrong. Marcus stood facing them fully. I'll lose my badge, probably go to prison, but I'll testify to everything. The bribery, the corruption, Garrett's whole operation. I'll burn it all down if it helps you keep those children. Lena stared at him for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she spoke, her voice cold as winter. Why now? Why not 6 months ago when you realized what you'd done? Because 6 months ago, I was still a coward. Still telling myself it didn't matter. Then I watched Cole fight for you, watched him come back to life for the first time in 3 years, and I remembered what honor looked like. The silence stretched out, painful and necessary. Finally, Lena nodded. Testimony won't be enough. Sterling has Judge Morrison. He probably has half the territorial government. We need more than one sheriff's confession. She moved to the small trunk where she kept her few possessions. From the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, she pulled out a bundle of papers. Daniel knew his father would come, eventually, either to take the children or to kill them. So he built a case, documented everything. She spread the papers on the table. Marriage certificate signed by Pastor William Cross and witnessed by 3 prominent citizens of Prescott. Letters from Daniel to his father begging for acceptance. Letters from Charles Garrett in return full of venom and disownment. A properly notarized will, leaving everything to his children and specifically excluding Charles Garrett from any inheritance. And at the bottom, a yellowed newspaper clipping from 1870. Texas land fraud investigation, Lena read. Charles Garrett of the Triple G Ranch accused of manipulating Spanish land grants through false documentation and bribery. Case dismissed due to lack of evidence. Marcus leaned forward, his lawman instincts taking over. He's done this before. Same scheme, different territory. 3 times that I could find, Lena said. Daniel researched it. Texas in 1870, New Mexico in 1873, Colorado in 1875. Each time Garrett used lawyers and corrupt officials to claim land that wasn't his. Each time the original owners were driven off or killed. Cole looked at the woman who'd been in his house less than a week and saw her clearly for the first time. Not a victim, not a widow waiting to be saved, a strategist, a fighter, someone who'd been preparing for this battle long before he arrived. "You knew they'd come," he said. "You've been ready. I've been ready since Daniel died in my arms and told me to protect the children no matter what. This isn't shelter, Cole. This is war. And I need to know if you're truly willing to fight it." He thought about the question she'd asked him in the barn, wife or shelter. The answer was becoming clearer with every passing hour. "I'm in," he said. "Whatever it takes." "Then we make them famous," Marcus said, his strategic mind clicking into gear. "We take this story public, every newspaper in the territory. Show the pattern. Show Garrett for what he is, a land thief who murders families to steal their inheritance." Lena nodded slowly. Daniel had contacts, editors who owed him favors. "If we can get the story out before the 48 hours are up, before Sterling comes back with his marshal, we might have a chance." "I'll ride to Prescott tonight," Marcus said. "Get this to the telegraph office. Send it to every paper I can think of. Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Phoenix, Denver. Hell, I'll send it to San Francisco if they'll run it." "They'll come for you," Cole warned. "Sterling, Garrett's men. Once you send those wires, you're a target." Marcus smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Cole had seen from him in a year. "Good. I've been a target before. At least this time, I'll deserve it." They worked through the night, organizing documents, drafting statements, building the case that might save 2 children from a grandfather who valued land over blood. Ben and Miguel came down from the loft, unable to sleep and helped by copying addresses and preparing envelopes. As dawn approached, Marcus prepared to ride. He'd changed into civilian clothes, leaving his badge on Cole's table. "If I come back wearing that, it means I compromised," he said. "Better to leave it here where it can't be tainted." Before he mounted, Lena stopped him. "Sheriff Webb, Marcus, thank you for telling the truth, even though it costs you everything." He nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in his throat. Then he was gone, riding hard for Prescott and whatever consequences waited there. Cole stood with Lena on the porch, watching the sun rise over the desert. In 46 hours, Sterling would return. In 46 hours, they'd know if truth and testimony were enough to stand against money and power. "You asked if I wanted a wife or shelter," Cole said quietly. "The answer is both. But more than that, I want to build something that lasts, something worth defending." Lena took his hand, their fingers intertwining. "Then let's build it together. And let's make sure it's strong enough to weather whatever storm comes next." Inside the cabin, 3 children slept the uneasy sleep of those who'd learned too young that safety was temporary and love was the only weapon worth wielding. The fence still stood. The graves on the hill kept their silent watch. And somewhere in the darkness, forces gathered that would test whether one broken rancher and one fierce widow could stand against an empire built on greed. The storm was coming. But for the first time in 3 years, Cole Brennan was ready to face it. Not alone. Never alone again. The morning after Marcus rode for Prescott, Cole made a decision. He saddled Ash before dawn and woke Miguel with a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Get dressed, son. We're going to town." Miguel's eyes went wide with fear. "But the lawyer said they're coming in 40 hours. That gives us time to make sure you're healthy enough to travel if we need to run. Doc Carter should check you over, make sure that fever's really gone." It was a half-truth. Cole needed Doc Carter for more than medical examination. He needed witnesses. He needed testimony. He needed people willing to stand up and say that Daniel and Lena's marriage had been real, recognized, legal in the ways that mattered. They rode into Prescott as the sun cleared the eastern mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Miguel sat in front of Cole on the saddle, still weak from his illness, but growing stronger by the hour. The boy had his mother's quiet strength, the kind that didn't announce itself, but showed up when the world demanded it. Doc Samuel Carter's office sat on Main Street, a neat clapboard building with a sign that read, "Physician and Surgeon," in faded letters. Cole had been here before, years ago when Ben had broken his arm falling from a horse. The doctor had set the bone with steady hands and charged half what he could have, knowing Cole was still raw from losing Sarah and Emma. The bell above the door chimed as they entered. Doc Carter looked up from his desk, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He was 58 years old, gray-haired and gentle-eyed, with the kind of face that made people trust him with their pain. Cole Brennan, he said, genuine warmth in his voice. And this must be young Miguel Martinez. I heard you were staying out at the ranch. Word travels fast, Cole said. In a town this size, word travels at the speed of gossip, which is faster than lightning. Doc Carter gestured to the examination table. Let's have a look at you, young man. While the doctor examined Miguel, listening to his lungs and checking his eyes and throat, Cole explained about the fever, the quinine, the slow return to health. Doc Carter worked with practiced efficiency, his questions gentle and his touch careful. Finally, he stepped back and smiled. You're healing well, son. Another week of rest and good food, you'll be strong as ever. Thank you, sir, Miguel said quietly. Doc Carter looked at Cole, and something passed between them, an understanding that this visit was about more than a medical examination. Miguel, why don't you wait in the front room? The doctor said. There's a jar of peppermint sticks on the counter. Help yourself to one. When the boy was gone, Doc Carter closed the door and leaned against his desk. What do you really need, Cole? The truth about Daniel Martinez and Elena Sandoval. You knew them. I did. Daniel came to me when Elena was pregnant with Sophia, wanted to make sure she had proper medical care. Not every doctor in the territory will treat Apache women, but Daniel didn't care what I thought about his marriage. He just cared that his wife and child were safe. Doc Carter pulled off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. He was a good man, honest, hard-working, the kind of husband and father every child deserves. Were they married legally? As legal as any marriage I've witnessed. Pastor William Cross performed the ceremony. I was there. So were Martha Henderson and her late husband and 2 ranchers from the valley. It was proper, documented, recognized by this community. Would you testify to that? Doc Carter met Cole's eyes. If it comes to it, yes. I'll testify that Daniel and Elena were married proper, that their children are legitimate, and that any claim otherwise is a damned lie. He paused, his expression hardening. I've delivered babies to all kinds of families, Cole, rich and poor, white and Indian and Mexican, and every mix you can imagine, and I've learned something in 30 years of practice. Cole waited. Love looks the same in every language. A father holding his newborn child, that look on his face, it doesn't matter what color his skin is or who his parents were. Love is love. And Daniel Martinez loved that woman and those children more than life itself. The words settled into Cole's chest like a warm weight. This was what they needed. Not just legal documents, but human testimony. People willing to stand up and say that what Sterling called illegitimate was really just love in a world too blind to recognize it. Thank you, Doc. Don't thank me yet. If Charles Garrett is behind this, you're going up against a man with more money and power than God. He'll crush anyone who stands in his way. Then we'll see how well crushing works when the whole territory is watching. Doc Carter smiled, a fierce expression that belonged on a younger man's face. I like the sound of that. Cole collected Miguel, and they left the office, but instead of riding back to the ranch, he turned Ash north. The boy looked up at him, curious. Where are we going? To see your family, your mother's family. The ride to the Mescalero camp took 3 hours, following trails that wound through rough country most white men avoided. But Cole had been here before, years ago, trading horses with men who valued honesty over the color of a man's skin. He knew the way. The camp sat in a sheltered valley where cottonwoods grew thick along a year-round creek. 30 wickiups spread across the flat ground, smoke rising from cook fires, children playing in the shade. As Cole and Miguel rode in, people stopped what they were doing to watch. An old man emerged from the largest wickiup, his face weathered as ancient stone, his hair white as winter snow. He wore traditional clothing, but his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who'd survived by adapting without surrendering. Red Sky Walker, Lena's uncle, the brother of her mother, White Dove. Cole dismounted and approached on foot, showing respect. Miguel followed, suddenly shy in the presence of family he barely knew. Red Sky Walker, Cole said. I'm Cole Brennan. This is Miguel Martinez, son of Elena, daughter of your sister, White Dove. The old man studied them both for a long moment. Then he spoke in English, his voice deep and clear. I know who you are. The rancher who took in my niece when her world burned. The question is, why did you come here to ask for your blessing and your help? Red Sky Walker gestured for them to follow him to a fire where other elders sat. Cole and Miguel settled onto the ground, and the old man offered them water from a gourd. It was a ritual of hospitality, of temporary peace. My sister White Dove loved a Spanish man, Red Sky Walker said. Antonio Sandoval. I told her it was wrong, that mixing blood would only bring pain. She married him anyway. He took a drink of water, remembering. Then my niece Elena loved a white man, Daniel Martinez. Again I said it was wrong, that she was betraying her people twice over. She married him anyway. The old man's eyes found Miguel's. Both times I was wrong. Your grandfather Antonio was a good man. Your father Daniel was a good man. They loved their families. They died protecting what mattered. He turned to Cole. And now you come here, another white man, asking me to accept what I have rejected twice before. I'm not asking you to accept anything, Cole said carefully. I'm asking you to help me protect them, Elena and the children, from men who want to take them because of land and money, not because of love. And what is your stake in this, rancher? Why do you fight for people you barely know? Cole thought about the question, about the real answer underneath all the practical reasons. Because 3 years ago, I lost my family to fire and violence. I've spent those years half dead going through motions, waiting for my life to be over. Then I found Elena and her children standing in the ashes of their world, and something in me remembered what it means to live. He met Red Skywalker's eyes. I'm not replacing what they lost. I can't bring back Daniel any more than I can bring back my Sarah. But I can make sure those children have a chance, have a home, have people willing to stand and fight when the world comes for them. Red Skywalker was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. My sister chose love over tradition. My niece chose love over safety. Both times it cost them everything. But both times they lived as themselves, free. That matters. He stood and the other elders stood with him. I will send 2 of my warriors to guard your ranch. Young men, strong, skilled, with weapons. They will stay as long as needed. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. If you fail, if the children are taken, my people will remember that another white man made promises he could not keep. Do not make promises you cannot keep, Cole Brennan. I won't. The old man placed a hand on Miguel's head, a gesture of blessing. Your father was brave. Your mother is strong. And this man, I think he has chosen to be family. That is good. Family protects family, even when the cost is high. By the time Cole and Miguel returned to the ranch, the sun was setting, and 2 Mescalero warriors had already arrived. They stood near the barn, young men in their 20s, armed with rifles and knives, their faces serious, but not unfriendly. Lena spoke with them in rapid Apache relief, visible in her shoulders. But something else had happened while Cole was gone. The yard was full of wagons and horses. People from town, from neighboring ranches, from every corner of the territory it seemed, 20 people at least, maybe more. Martha Henderson stood on Cole's porch like she owned it, directing traffic. Her 2 sons carried lumber from their wagon. Pastor William Cross supervised the unloading of food supplies. 3 Mexican farmers Cole barely knew were setting up camp near the creek. Ben ran to meet his father, excitement making him breathless. Dad? They came. Mrs. Henderson called a meeting in town, and everyone came. Cole dismounted slowly, overwhelmed. Lena walked over her expression, a mix of disbelief and hope. Martha organized this, she said, while you were gone. She stood up in the middle of her store and told everyone what was happening. And they came. Martha Henderson descended from the porch, her practical dress dusty from travel, her face set with determination. Cole Brennan, you've lived like a hermit for 3 years. But you helped my family when our barn burned last winter. You helped the Johnsons when their baby was sick. You've been a good neighbor even when you didn't want to be. She gestured at the crowd. Now you're in trouble, fighting for something that matters. You think we'd let you face it alone? Pastor Cross stepped forward, his Bible tucked under his arm. Scripture says, protect the widow and the orphan. Far as I'm concerned, that's exactly what we're doing here. Jack Henderson, Martha's oldest son, nodded. You stood with us, Cole. Now we stand with you. One of the Mexican farmers, a man named Diego Santos, spoke up. We know what it is like to be called outsiders, to have people say our families are not legitimate. We will not let them do this to more children. Cole looked around at the faces, at people who'd driven hours to be here, who'd left their own work and their own safety to stand with strangers. His throat was tight, words failing him. Ben tugged his sleeve. Dad, they want to help build defenses, watch towers and stuff like you did in the war. The mention of the war jolted Cole back to practical matters. If Sterling was coming back with force, they needed to be ready. Not just emotionally ready, but tactically ready. All right, he said, his voice rough. If we're doing this, we do it right. He turned to Jack Henderson and the other men. We need elevated positions. 2 watchtowers, 1 north and 1 south, where we can see riders coming from a distance. We need clear fields of fire but good cover. And we need supplies staged at multiple points in case we have to move fast. The men nodded, already understanding. Several of them had fought in the war, same as Cole. They knew what defense looked like. Women and children. Cole continued, looking at Martha and the others. We need a protected area, the storm cellar under the cabin. Stock it with food, water, blankets. If shooting starts, that's where everyone goes who can't fight. Martha was already making notes on a scrap of paper. "We'll handle it." The work began immediately. Jack and Tom Henderson, along with Diego Santos and his two brothers, started building the watchtowers using lumber from their wagons. Pastor Cross organized the food supplies, creating stockpiles that could be accessed quickly. The Mescalero warriors took positions on the high ground, scouting the approaches, mapping the terrain like the skilled fighters they were. As darkness fell, someone started a fire in the yard. Food appeared, a communal meal made from everyone's contributions. Beans and tortillas, roasted meat bread, fresh from Martha's kitchen that morning. The children ate together, Ben and Miguel and Sophia, mixing with the other kids, their laughter rising into the night sky. Cole found himself standing apart, watching. Lena joined him, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She offered him one. "You didn't expect this," she said. "No, I spent 3 years pushing people away. Didn't think they'd come when I needed them." People remember kindness even when you've forgotten you showed it. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the community that had gathered to protect 2 children most of them had never met. Miguel sat with Pastor Cross, the boy asking questions about the Bible, while the pastor answered with patient wisdom. Sophia slept in Martha Henderson's lap, the older woman humming a lullaby that crossed all boundaries of culture and language. "Tomorrow," Cole said, "we finish the preparations, make this place as ready as we can, and then we wait." 36 hours, Lena said, "until Sterling comes back. Marcus will have sent the telegrams by now. The story will be spreading. Newspapers in Santa Fe, Albuquerque, maybe further. Will it be enough?" Cole thought about that. About the power of truth against the power of money. About ordinary people standing against extraordinary corruption. "I don't know, but I know we're not alone. That has to count for something." Later that night, after most people had settled into bedrolls and makeshift shelters, Cole found Ben and Miguel sitting together on the porch steps. The 2 boys had grown close over the past week, their friendship built on shared loss and new hope. "What are you 2 doing up?" Cole asked. "Couldn't sleep," Ben admitted. "Thinking about what happens next." Miguel nodded. "My papa used to say that fear is just love worried about losing something. I'm scared because I love my mama and Sophia, because I don't want to lose them like I lost him." Cole sat down between them, these 2 boys, who'd both known too much grief for their ages. "Your papa was right, and being scared doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. Only fools walk into danger without fear." "But you're not scared," Ben said. "You never look scared." Cole smiled in the darkness. "I'm terrified. Every hour of every day since you all arrived. Scared I'll fail. Scared I'll lose people I care about. Scared I'll end up alone again." He put an arm around each boy's shoulders. "But I'm also something else. I'm determined. And I'm not alone this time." "Neither are you." Miguel leaned against Cole's side, this boy who'd trusted him with the secret of a land grant worth a fortune. Ben did the same, his son who'd waited 3 years for his father to come back from the dead. "We're family now," Miguel said quietly. "Right. That's what Mama says. That family is the people who stay when staying is hard." "Yeah," Cole said, his voice thick. "We're family." Above them, stars filled the desert sky, ancient and indifferent to the small dramas of humanity. But here on this porch in this moment, 3 people who'd found each other in the ashes created something that would outlast the stars. The fence still stood. The community had gathered. And somewhere in the darkness, an empire of greed was about to discover that ordinary people, when pushed far enough, could become extraordinary. The storm was 36 hours away. They would be ready. The 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation and waiting. The watchtowers went up crude but functional, giving clear views of the approaches from north and south. The storm cellar was stocked with enough supplies to last a week if needed. Ammunition was distributed to those who could shoot. Fields of fire were cleared. Escape routes were planned. Marcus returned on the second day riding hard, his face grim but determined. He'd sent telegrams to 14 newspapers across 4 territories. The story was spreading like wildfire through editorial offices and saloons, courtrooms, and cattle camps. Charles Garrett's name was being spoken in the same breath as fraud, murder, corruption. But whether that would stop Sterling and his federal marshal was another question entirely. On the evening of the second day, as the sun painted the western sky in shades of blood and fire, Cole called everyone together in the yard. 30 people gathered in a loose circle, their faces reflecting the orange glow of the sunset. Children sat with their parents. The Mescalero warriors stood at the edge as silent guardians. Martha Henderson held Sophia on her hip, the little girl's fingers twisted in the older woman's hair. Cole wasn't a speechmaker. He'd spent 3 years barely speaking at all, but these people had come for him, for Lena, for children they barely knew. They deserved words. "Tomorrow morning," he began, his voice carrying in the still desert air, "lawyers and guns are coming to this ranch. They'll have papers signed by judges. They'll have a federal marshal backing their play. They'll have the weight of the law on their side." He paused, looking at each face in turn. "But we have something they don't. We have the truth. We have witnesses to a legal marriage. We have documents proving fraud and corruption. And we have each other." Pastor Cross stepped forward, his Bible open in his hands. "Scripture tells us to defend the widow and the orphan, to stand against those who would use power to crush the powerless. Tomorrow we do exactly that." Martha Henderson shifted Sophia to her other hip. "Cole Brennan, you spent 3 years alone pushing everyone away. But you were always part of this community, whether you wanted to be or not. We don't abandon our own." Jack Henderson nodded, his young face serious. "You helped us last winter when our barn burned, worked 3 days straight in freezing weather to rebuild it, never asked for payment, just did it because it needed doing." Diego Santos spoke next, his accented English clear and strong. "My family came to this territory 20 years ago. We were told we did not belong, that our children were not legitimate because their grandfather was Apache. We know this fight. We stand with you." One by one people spoke. Ranchers and farmers, shopkeepers and craftsmen, men and women who'd chosen to drive hours through dangerous country because something bigger than themselves called to them. The need to stand against injustice, the need to protect children, the need to prove that ordinary people, when united, could face down empires. Red Skywalker's voice cut through the gathering dusk, deep and resonant. "My people have fought for survival for generations. We have lost much: land, family, ways of life. But we have learned this truth. One person alone is weak. One family alone is vulnerable. But a community, a true community, is unbreakable." He looked at Lena, at Miguel and Sophia. "These children carry blood from 3 worlds. Apache, Spanish, white settler. They are the future if we are brave enough to protect it." Lena stood and the crowd quieted. She'd been silent through most of the gathering, letting others speak, but now her voice rang out clear and strong. "2 weeks ago I stood in the ashes of my home and thought my life was over. My husband was dead. My children were orphaned. I had nothing." She turned to Cole. "Then this man rode into the smoke. This man who'd spent 3 years dying slowly decided to live again. He didn't save me. I didn't need saving. But he gave me something I'd lost." She paused, emotion thick in her throat. "He gave me hope that the world still had good people in it. People who act because it's right, not because it profits them. Every person here tonight is proof of that." She pulled Miguel and Sophia close. "Tomorrow men will come to take my children, men who value land over love, money over family. They will have the law. They will have guns. They will have everything except what matters." Her eyes blazed with fierce determination. "They will not have right on their side, and they will not have us, any of us." The crowd erupted in affirmation. Voices raised in agreement, in solidarity, in the kind of defiance that comes from knowing you stand on moral ground, even when legal ground shifts beneath you. As darkness fell completely, someone started singing, an old hymn one the settlers knew from Sunday services and the Mexican families knew from their own traditions. The words were different, but the melody was the same. A song about deliverance, about standing firm, about faith in something larger than fear. The Mescalero warriors didn't sing, but they hummed a low counterpoint that wove through the hymn like thread through fabric. 3 cultures, 3 languages, 1 song of resistance. Cole felt his chest tighten. He'd forgotten what this felt like. Community. Belonging. The knowledge that you weren't facing the darkness alone. Ben pressed against his side, and Cole put his arm around his son's shoulders. Miguel stood on his other side, and without thinking, Cole's other arm came up to hold him too. 2 boys, both his now, in ways that mattered more than blood. The singing continued as people began to settle for the night. Most would sleep in shifts, keeping watch, staying ready. But for this moment, there was music and firelight and the warmth of human connection against the cold desert night. Later, when the camp had quieted and most people slept, Cole found himself unable to rest. He walked the perimeter, checking the watchtowers, speaking quietly with the men on duty. Everything was as ready as it could be. He ended up at the northern fence line, the same section he and Lena had repaired together days ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then, or maybe he'd lived more in the past 2 weeks than in the previous 3 years. Footsteps behind him. He didn't turn. He knew her walk now, the particular rhythm of it. "Couldn't sleep either?" Lena asked, coming to stand beside him. "Too much thinking. About tomorrow. About everything." He turned to face her, and in the starlight, her face was a study in contrasts. Strength and vulnerability. Hope and fear, past and future. You asked me a question, Cole said. In the barn, you asked if I wanted a wife or just shelter. I remember. I've been thinking about the answer. Really thinking, not just reacting. Lena waited patient as stone. When Sarah died, I built walls so high I couldn't see over them. Told myself I'd never care again because caring meant risk, and risk meant loss, and I couldn't survive another loss. He took a breath, gathering courage. But these past 2 weeks, watching you with your children, watching you stand up to Sterling, watching you organize defense and strategy and hope, I realized something. What? I was already dead. Had been for 3 years. Safe maybe, but dead. You didn't save me. But you reminded me that being alive means risking pain, that love and loss are 2 sides of the same coin, that you can't have one without accepting the possibility of the other. He reached out and took her hand, feeling the calluses there, the strength in her fingers. If we survive tomorrow, if we keep your children safe and build something lasting here, I want to try. Not replacing Daniel, not pretending Sarah never existed, but building something new, together, as equals. Lena's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. And if we don't survive tomorrow, then I'll die knowing I lived these last weeks, really lived. That's more than I had before you arrived. She stepped closer, and for a moment, Cole thought she might kiss him. But instead she rested her forehead against his, a gesture more intimate than any kiss could have been. You're a good man, Cole Brennan. Better than you know. And yes, if we survive, I'll try too. Build something new. See where it leads. They stood like that for a long time, connected but not entangled, present but not pushing 2 people learning to trust again in a world that had given them every reason not to. Finally, Lena stepped back. I should check on the children. I'll walk you back. As they approached the cabin, Cole saw a small figure sitting on the porch steps. Ben awake, despite the late hour waiting. You should be asleep, son. Couldn't. Ben's voice was small, tight with emotion. Dad, can I talk to you, just us? Lena squeezed Cole's hand once and went inside, leaving father and son alone under the stars. Cole sat beside Ben on the steps, their shoulders touching. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ben's voice cracked the silence, raw with pain, held too long. Do you wish I died instead of Emma? The question hit Cole like a physical blow. He turned to his son, seeing tear tracks on the boy's face, seeing 3 years of accumulated hurt spilling out. God, no. Ben, no. Where did you get that idea? You talk to them every week. Tell them you're sorry. You never talk to me. Never tell me you're sorry. I'm all you have left. Cole felt his own tears coming hot and burning. Ben, listen to me. Really listen. He pulled his son close, holding him tight. When Emma died, part of me died too. The part that knew how to be a father, how to show love, how to live. I got stuck in that moment, in that loss, and I forgot that I still had you. That you needed me just as much as Emma had. Ben sobbed against his father's chest, 7 years of loneliness pouring out. I'm sorry, Cole whispered. God, I'm so sorry. I made you invisible, made you feel like you didn't matter, like I wished you'd been the one to die instead of her. But that's not true. It was never true. He pulled back enough to look Ben in the eyes. You're the reason I'm still here, the reason I got up every morning even when I didn't want to. I just forgot how to show it, forgot how to be your father instead of just a ghost in the same house. I thought you hated me. I could never hate you. You're my son, my boy, the best part of me that survived the fire. Ben threw his arms around Cole's neck, and they held each other while 3 years of grief and regret poured out into the desert night. Cole rocked his son like he used to when Ben was small, before the world taught them both that safety was an illusion and love was dangerous. Tomorrow, Cole said when they could both breathe again, dangerous men are coming, men with guns and papers and the law behind them. It's going to be scary. I know. But I need you to know something. No matter what happens, you taught me how to live again. You and Lena and Miguel and Sophia. You reminded me what family means, what love means, what's worth fighting for. Ben wiped his eyes. Will we win? I don't know, but I know we'll fight. Together, and that's what matters. Dad? Ben's voice was small again. I love you. The words broke something in Cole's chest, something that had been frozen for 3 years. I love you too, son. So damn much. I'm sorry it took me so long to remember how to say it. They sat together on the porch steps, father and son, healing wounds that had festered in silence. Above them, the stars wheeled through their ancient patterns, indifferent to human pain, but witness to human resilience. Inside the cabin, Lena held Miguel and Sophia close, telling them stories of their father, keeping his memory alive while building hope for a future he'd never see. In the yard, people slept in shifts, keeping watch, staying ready. At the edges of the camp, Mescalero warriors stood guard, silent and alert. And somewhere in the darkness, 12 hours away, Victor Sterling prepared to return with a federal marshal and enough hired guns to ensure that Charles Garrett got what he wanted. But he didn't know about the newspapers, didn't know that his employer's name was already spreading across the territory like poison in a well contaminating everything it touched. Didn't know that 30 people had gathered not because they were paid, but because they chose to stand against injustice. He didn't know that ordinary people, when united by something bigger than themselves, could become extraordinary. The fence still stood weathered, but strong. The graves on the hill kept their silent vigil, and in a small cabin in the Arizona desert, people who'd lost everything were building something that might last forever. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because it was right. Cole finally got Ben to sleep around midnight, tucking him into the loft beside Miguel and Sophia. The 3 children slept tangled together like puppies, finding comfort in proximity. He came back down to find Lena sitting at the table, Daniel's papers spread before her. She was writing something, her hand moving steadily across the page. "What's that?" Cole asked quietly. "A letter. To my children. In case tomorrow doesn't go the way we hope." Cole sat across from her, watching her write. The words were in Spanish, but he could guess their content. Instructions, memories, love expressed in ink, because tomorrow might not allow for words. "You think it'll come to shooting?" he asked. "I think Sterling will try to avoid it. Bad publicity killing civilians. But if we don't surrender the children, if we force his hand, yes, I think it could come to that." She finished writing and folded the letter, carefully sealing it with candle wax. "If I die tomorrow, this goes to Miguel when he's 16, old enough to understand, old enough to make his own choices about the land grant, about his future. You're not going to die. You can't promise that." "No. But I can promise I'll do everything in my power to make sure you don't, that you and your children walk away from this alive and free." Lena looked at him across the table, and something passed between them. Not love, not yet. They hadn't had time for that. But something deeper than attraction, stronger than gratitude. Recognition. 2 people who'd survived the unsurvivable, finding each other in the wreckage and deciding to build rather than surrender. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said, "thank you. For giving us these 2 weeks, for letting us feel safe, even if it was temporary, for teaching my children that there are still good men in the world. I could say the same. You taught me I wasn't dead yet, that there was still life worth living." They sat in comfortable silence as the candle burned low. Outside, the camp settled into the deep quiet that comes before dawn. The last watch of the night took their positions. The desert held its breath. In 8 hours, the sun would rise. In 10 hours, riders would appear on the horizon, and then they would learn if truth and community could stand against corruption and power. Cole reached across the table and took Lena's hand one more time. "Whatever happens, we face it together." "Together," she agreed. They sat like that until the first gray light of dawn touched the eastern sky, 2 people who'd found each other in darkness, preparing to face whatever light would bring. The perimeter was secure. The community stood united. And hope, fragile but real, still lived in the hearts of people who'd decided that some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth dying for. But most importantly, some things were worth living for. Tomorrow, they would prove which mattered most. Dawn broke clear and cold over the Arizona desert, the sun rising like a promise or a threat, depending on where you stood. Cole Brennan had been awake for hours, watching from the northern tower as the sky changed from black to gray to gold. Beside him, one of Red Skywalker's warriors kept silent vigil, his rifle resting easy in his hands. Below, the camp stirred to life. Women prepared breakfast over cook fires. Men checked weapons and ammunition one final time. Children were moved to the storm cellar with Martha Henderson standing guard, her own rifle loaded and ready. This was no place for little ones if things went bad. Miguel had refused to go below. At 9 years old, he stood with the men, his father's medallion hidden beneath his shirt, his jaw set with the kind of determination that came from watching your world burn and deciding to fight for what remained. Cole had tried to argue, but Lena shook her head. He needs to see this, needs to know that standing up matters even when standing up is terrifying. So Miguel stood beside Pastor Cross, learning what courage looked like when it wore a clergyman's collar and held a Bible instead of a gun. By 9 in the morning, the waiting became unbearable. People checked the horizon every few minutes, looking for dust clouds that would signal approaching riders. The desert stretched away in all directions, empty and patient as time itself. Then Jack Henderson called down from the southern tower, Riders coming. 8, maybe 9, half-mile out. Every person in camp went still. This was it, the moment they'd prepared for, the moment that would decide whether truth and community could stand against money and corruption. Cole climbed down from the northern tower and walked to where Lena stood in the yard. She'd changed into a clean dress, her hair braided and pinned, presenting herself not as a desperate widow, but as a woman who knew her worth and her rights. In her hands, she held the bundle of papers Daniel had prepared. Marriage certificate, witness statements, her husband's will. "You ready?" Cole asked. "No, but I'll do it anyway." Marcus Webb emerged from the cabin no longer wearing his sheriff's badge. He'd surrendered it formally to the town council yesterday, confessing his bribery, accepting whatever consequences came. But he was here now, testimony prepared, ready to burn down Charles Garrett's empire with his own confession. The riders crested the small rise to the south and came on at an easy pace. No rush, no urgency. Men who believed they held all the power and knew it. Victor Sterling rode at the front, his expensive suit somehow still immaculate despite the desert dust. Beside him was a man Cole didn't recognize, 50-something, with a federal marshal's badge pinned to his vest. James Reed, by the look of him. 6 hired guns followed, spread out in a line, hands near their weapons but not threatening. Not yet. They reined in 30 yards from the cabin, and Sterling dismounted with theatrical slowness. Marshal Reed stayed mounted, his weathered face unreadable. "Mr. Brennan," Sterling called out, his voice carrying across the yard, "I see you've gathered quite a crowd. How festive." Cole stepped forward, Lena beside him, Marcus behind them. The rest of the community formed a loose semicircle, 30 people standing witness to whatever came next. "State your business, Sterling." The lawyer pulled papers from his coat. "I have here a federal warrant for the custody of Miguel and Sofia Martinez, signed by Judge Harold Morrison and endorsed by Marshal Reed. We've come to execute that warrant, peacefully if possible." "The warrant's based on fraud," Marcus called out. "Bribery and false testimony. I should know. I provided the false testimony." Sterling's smile never wavered. "Former Sheriff Webb, how good of you to confess your crime so publicly. I'm sure the territorial court will take your confession into account during your trial." He turned to Marshal Reed. "Marshal, I believe we have legal authority here." Reed shifted in his saddle but said nothing. His eyes moved across the gathered crowd, taking in the numbers, the determination, the potential for this to go very badly, very quickly. Before anyone could speak, Lena stepped forward, not behind Cole, not waiting for men to defend her. Forward into the space between the two groups, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Elena Sandoval Martinez. I am the lawful widow of Daniel Martinez and the mother of Miguel and Sofia Martinez. And I will not surrender my children to a man who murdered their father." Sterling's smile finally cracked. "Careful, Mrs. Martinez. Slander is a serious charge." "Is it slander when it's true?" She raised her voice, addressing not just Sterling, but everyone present. "Charles Garrett is a cattle baron from Texas. When my husband Daniel, his only son, married me against his wishes, Garrett disowned him, called him a race traitor, said his children would never inherit the Garrett name." She pulled out Daniel's letters, holding them high. "But my husband had something Garrett wanted, a Spanish land grant, 50,000 acres of prime grazing land legally transferred to Daniel by his grandfather, land worth over $100,000. Miguel stepped forward, then pulling the silver medallion from beneath his shirt. He held it up so everyone could see the morning sun catching the engraved coordinates. "This is proof," the boy said, his voice steady, despite his fear. "My papa gave it to me before he died, told me to keep it safe, told me it was my inheritance." Sterling's face went pale. "That medallion proves nothing without proper documentation." "We have documentation," Lena said. She gestured to Pastor Cross, who stepped forward with a wooden box. "Marriage certificate signed by Pastor William Cross and witnessed by Martha Henderson, her late husband Samuel, and ranchers John Cooper and Thomas Wade, all respected citizens." Doc Carter moved forward. "I witnessed the marriage as well, delivered both of Elena's children. Daniel Martinez was of sound mind and body when he married this woman. Any claim otherwise is a damned lie." Martha Henderson's voice rang out next. "I was there, saw them take their vows, saw Daniel look at Elena like she hung the moon. That was a real marriage, legal and binding." One by one, people stepped forward. Ranchers who'd traded with Daniel, shopkeepers who'd extended him credit, Mexican farmers who'd shared meals with his family, each one testifying that Daniel and Elena's marriage had been real, recognized, legal in all the ways that mattered. Sterling's composure was cracking now, his voice rising. "None of this changes the fact that Judge Morrison signed a custody warrant. The law is clear." "The law is corrupt," Marcus said, stepping forward. Judge Morrison signed that warrant after receiving payment from Charles Garrett, just like I signed an affidavit after receiving payment. We were both bought sterling, and now we're both talking." He pulled papers from his own pocket. "I have here copies of telegrams sent to 14 newspapers across 4 territories. Every one of them details Charles Garrett's pattern of land fraud. Texas in 1870, New Mexico in 1873, Colorado in 1875. Now Arizona in 1878. Same scheme every time. Corrupt judges, bought lawmen, dead families who couldn't fight back." Sterling's hand moved toward his coat, but Marshal Reed's voice cut through the tension. "Don't!" Everyone turned to look at the marshal. He'd dismounted now, standing separate from Sterling and the hired guns, his face set, with the grim expression of a man making a hard choice. "I was paid to come here," Reed said, his voice carrying across the yard. "Paid well. Told this was a simple custody matter, legally sound, nothing complicated." He looked at Sterling, and there was contempt in his eyes. "But I've been listening, and I heard you, Sterling. Heard you admit to bribery. Heard you admit to paying off judges and lawmen. Heard enough to know this warrant isn't worth the paper it's printed on." Sterling's face went from pale to red. "Marshal Reed, you have your orders. I have my conscience. And right now it's telling me I've been used to facilitate kidnapping and fraud." Reed removed his badge, holding it up for everyone to see. "I'll be writing to the federal court in Santa Fe. I'll be testifying to everything I heard here today. And I'll be recommending that Judge Morrison be investigated and that Charles Garrett be charged with conspiracy fraud and conspiracy to commit murder." The hired guns looked at each other, calculating odds. 6 of them against 30 civilians, 2 Mescalero warriors, and now a federal marshal who'd switched sides. The math didn't work in their favor. Sterling's hand moved faster than anyone expected. He pulled a small derringer from his coat pocket, the kind of weapon gamblers carried, and pointed it directly at Lena. "The children! Now! Or she dies." Time seemed to slow. Cole saw the gun, saw Sterling's finger tightening on the trigger, saw Lena's eyes widen, not with fear, but with fury that this man thought he could threaten her in front of her children. Cole moved without thinking, throwing himself between Lena and the gun. The derringer's crack was small, almost polite, compared to the roar of rifles, but the bullet hit like a hammer, punching into Cole's left shoulder and spinning him around. He heard Lena scream his name, heard Ben crying out, heard the chaos of 30 people shouting at once, but what happened next took less than 3 seconds. Lena's hand moved to her belt, pulling the hunting knife she always carried, the same knife she'd held when Cole first met her, standing in the ashes of her burned home. She moved like water, like wind, like a force of nature that had been held back too long. The knife flashed once in the morning sun and took Sterling in the chest, dead center, driven by a mother's rage and a widow's determination. The lawyer's eyes went wide with shock. He looked down at the blade buried in his heart, then up at Lena's fierce face. "That's for my husband," she said quietly. "And for thinking you could threaten my children." Sterling fell backward into the dust and didn't move again. The hired guns froze. One of them made a move toward his pistol, but the distinctive sound of 30 rifles being cocked stopped him cold. The Mescalero warriors had their weapons trained. The ranchers and farmers had theirs ready. Even Pastor Cross had picked up a rifle, his face set with righteous anger. "Anyone else want to try?" Marcus asked, his own weapon steady. The hired guns raised their hands slowly. They were paid to intimidate, not to die for a dead lawyer's cause. Marshal Reed walked over to where Sterling lay, checked for a pulse he knew he wouldn't find, and nodded. "Self-defense. I saw it. He drew first, threatened to kill her. Any court in the territory will rule it justifiable." Cole sat in the dust, his hand pressed to his shoulder, where blood seeped between his fingers. The pain was bright and sharp, but he'd been shot before during the war. He knew the difference between a wound that killed and one that just hurt like hell. This was the latter. Lena dropped to her knees beside him, her hands shaking now that the crisis had passed. "You fool! You beautiful fool! Taking bullets for me!" Seemed like a good idea at the time. Cole managed his voice tight with pain. Doc Carter was already there, his medical bag open, his steady hands probing the wound. Bullet went clean through. Missed the bone, missed the artery. "You'll live, Cole, though you'll have a scar to match your other ones." Ben and Miguel pushed through the crowd, both boys crying, both trying to be brave and failing. Cole reached out his good arm and pulled them close. "I'm okay, just a scratch." "Dad, you got shot." "I've been shot before. This one's not even in the top 5. Despite the pain, despite the blood, despite everything, Cole found himself laughing. The absurdity of it all, the relief of survival, the sheer improbability that they'd actually won. Marshal Reed organized the hired guns, disarming them and preparing to escort them to the territorial jail. He looked at Lena, at the knife still in her hand, at Sterling's body. "You'll need to come to Santa Fe eventually, give formal testimony about what happened here." "I understand. But given what I witnessed, given Sterling's confession, before witnesses, given the pattern of fraud we've uncovered, I don't anticipate charges. You defended yourself and your children against a man attempting murder and kidnapping." He mounted his horse, the prisoners tied together and walking behind him. "I'll send word to Charles Garrett that his lawyer is dead and his scheme is exposed. I suspect he'll face federal charges within the month. Either way, those children are yours, Mrs. Martinez, legally and morally." As Reed and his prisoners disappeared toward the horizon, the gathered crowd erupted in celebration. People embraced, cried, laughed, with the kind of relief that comes from surviving something terrible. Martha Henderson emerged from the storm cellar with Sophia, the little girl, running to her mother and wrapping her arms around Lena's neck. Doc Carter finished bandaging Cole's shoulder, binding it tight. "No heavy lifting for a month. Keep it clean. Change the dressing twice daily. And for God's sake, stop jumping in front of bullets." "I'll try." Cole stood with Doc's help, his shoulder on fire, but his heart light. Ben and Miguel supported him on either side, these two boys who'd become brothers in all the ways that mattered. Pastor Cross approached his Bible tucked under his arm. "Cole, when you're healed up, I'd like to perform a marriage ceremony, if you and Elena are still interested." Cole looked at Lena holding Sophia, her dress stained with Sterling's blood, and Cole's, her hair coming loose from its pins, her face exhausted and beautiful and alive. "That depends on the lady." Lena met his eyes and a smile touched her lips. "Yes? When you're healed? When the children have had time to adjust? Yes, I'll marry you, Cole Brennan." The celebration continued through the afternoon and into the evening. People who'd stood together in crisis now shared food and stories, building the kind of bonds that would last generations. The Henderson boys helped dispose of Sterling's body, marking the spot for the marshal's office to collect. The Mescalero warriors prepared to return to their camp, their duty fulfilled, their honor satisfied. As sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, Red Skywalker approached Cole, who sat on the porch with his arm in a sling. "You fought well, rancher. Protected family, like family should be protected. Couldn't have done it without your warriors, without everyone." The old man nodded. "My niece chose wisely, I think, both times. Daniel first, now you. Both men who valued love over fear, family over isolation." He placed a hand on Cole's good shoulder. "Take care of them. All of them. Build something that lasts." "I will." 3 months passed in a blur of healing and building. Cole's shoulder mended slowly, the wound leaving a puckered scar that Lena traced sometimes with gentle fingers, a reminder of the day he'd chosen her life over his own safety. The newspapers had their field day with Charles Garrett. Federal charges were filed. Judge Morrison was removed from the bench and faced his own prosecution. The pattern of fraud across multiple territories unraveled like thread pulled from cloth, exposing corruption that reached higher than anyone had imagined. Garrett himself fled to Mexico, avoiding trial, but losing everything. His ranch was seized, his assets frozen, his name becoming synonymous with the worst kind of American greed. The land grant, properly validated now through legal channels cleared of corruption, was worth exactly what Lena had said. $106,000 when they sold 40,000 acres to the railroad company, expanding west. They kept 10,000 acres, combining it with Cole's original homestead to create a ranch that could support multiple families for generations. On a cool October morning, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at Cole Brennan and Elena Martinez were married in a ceremony attended by over 100 people. Pastor Cross performed the service, his voice strong and sure as he spoke of second chances and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Cole wore his best suit, the one he'd been married in before, but this time without the shadow of loss hanging over him. Ben stood beside him, as best man, 13 years old now, and growing into the kind of young man who made his father proud. Lena wore a dress that Martha Henderson had made simple white cotton, with Apache beadwork along the collar and cuffs, a fusion of the worlds she carried within her. Miguel and Sophia stood with her, both children smiling, both understanding that this marriage didn't replace their father, but honored him by building the future he'd wanted for them. The vows were simple. Cole spoke first. "I promise to build fences to keep you safe, but never to keep you out. I promise to honor your past, your people, your strength. I promise to be the father Miguel and Sophia deserve, and the husband you chose. I promise to remember that I'm alive, every day, because of you." Lena's voice was steady and clear. I promise to remind you every day that you have a heart. I promise to stand beside you, not behind you. I promise to make this ranch a home, not just a shelter. And I promise to love you, broken pieces and all, because broken pieces put back together are often stronger than things that never broke. They exchanged rings, simple silver bands made by a craftsman in Prescott. When Pastor Cross pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed Lena like he was sealing a promise, making a vow that went deeper than words. The celebration afterward was pure joy, music and dancing and food enough to feed an army. Ben and Miguel ran wild with the other children, their laughter filling the desert air. Sophia taught the other girls an Apache song her grandmother had taught Lena, who taught her. 3 generations of love and culture passed down through voice and memory. As the sun set and the party continued, Cole found himself standing once more at the northern fence line. But this time, he wasn't alone. Lena stood beside him, her hand in his, their wedding rings catching the last light of day. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "About the graves on that hill. About Sarah and Emma. About whether I've betrayed them by being happy again." Lena squeezed his hand. "You haven't betrayed anyone. Love doesn't work that way. The heart doesn't have a limited supply. It grows to hold what it needs to hold. You think they'd approve of you, of this. I think they'd want you to live, really live, not just survive." Cole thought about that, about the 3 years he'd spent as a ghost, about the 2 weeks that had changed everything, about the choice he'd made to step between Lena and a bullet. "I'm glad I rode toward the smoke that day. So am I." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the fence line stretch away into the gathering darkness. The fence Cole had built 3 years ago to keep the world out. The fence Lena had helped him repair, transforming it from a barrier into a boundary, from isolation into protection. "What do we do with all that money?" Lena asked. "From the land sale." "What do you want to do?" She smiled. "Build a school, a real school, where any child can learn regardless of who their parents were or what blood they carry. Apache, Mexican, white, any mix, everyone equal, everyone valued." "That's a lot of money for a school." "Then we build a hospital too. Get a doctor out here full time. Make sure no family loses children to fever or injury because they can't afford treatment or don't know where to go." Cole pulled her close, careful of his healing shoulder. "You're going to change this whole territory, aren't you? We're going to change it together. Build something that lasts." Years later, when storytellers spoke of the Brennan Ranch, they would talk about the school that educated 3 generations of children, about the hospital that saved countless lives, about the community that formed when people chose to stand together against injustice. But they would also talk about 2 people who found each other in the worst possible circumstances and decided to build rather than break. A rancher who'd been dead for 3 years and learned to live again. A widow who'd lost everything and fought to keep what mattered. The fence still stood weathered and repaired and expanded as the ranch grew. 7 years after that October wedding, Cole and Lena would stand in almost the same spot watching Ben and Miguel work the cattle together, watching Sophia ride to school where she helped teach the younger children. A new baby would be crying in Lena's arms, a daughter named Emma, Sarah Martinez Brennan, carrying the names of those who came before proof that love didn't erase the past, but built upon it. And on the hill behind the ranch, 4 graves would rest under cottonwood trees that had grown tall and strong. Sarah and Emma Brennan, their crosses weathered but standing, and 2 empty plots beside them marked with stones that read, "Reserved for Cole and Elena, who chose to live." Because that's what it came down to in the end, the choice to live, the choice to love despite loss, the choice to build fences not to keep the world out, but to protect what mattered most. As the sun set on that October evening in 1878, Cole Brennan held his wife close and made a silent promise to the graves on the hill, to the children playing in the yard, to the community that had stood with them when standing was hard. He would protect this, all of it. The family he'd found, the love he'd chosen, the future they were building together. Some legacies were built on land. The best ones were built on love. And this one, forged in fire and sealed with blood and blessed by community, would last forever. The fence still stood. The living thrived. And hope, that fragile and fierce thing, bloomed in the Arizona desert like wildflowers after rain. The end.